Right. Hello, folks. We'll just introduce ourselves. I'm not positive what the track host situation is here.
I'm not sure.
All right. So if you are here to learn about Helm 3, you are in the right place. If you are not in the right place, good luck finding anything else in this exciting facility. A little bit about us. You have to have the intro walk-in stuff happening while people are all finding their seats. By the way, if there's an empty seat next to you, if you raise your hand, you are a very nice person, because lots of people are trying to find somewhere to sit. So if there's an empty seat and you keep your hand up for just a second, then people can actually sit in chairs as opposed to standing in the back, which would be lovely. Okay, hi, I'm Bridget, and I do tech advocacy at Microsoft. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in the United States. We are in the middle, right below Canada. We kind of hope Canada will annex us, so more on that later. If I don't look familiar, but I sound familiar, it may be because of my podcast, Arrested DevOps, that I co-host. And I'm also the global head organizer for DevOps Days.
And then my name is Jessica Deen. I am super into fitness and CrossFit, but I also love Disney. So the picture of me smiling with an Avengers hoodie on, that's a child's hoodie, by the way. That was at Disneyland, and then I have a BB-8 that rolls around. I am also a cloud advocate at Microsoft. So aside from liking fitness and Disney and all that, I also very much enjoy tech, code, and hanging out with other engineers. So I love to be very authentic and truly mean it when I say this, but I have what I feel is the best job in the world because I get to hang out with people like all of you in beautiful Barcelona, Spain. So I'm so very happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm delighted too. So quick outline, and by the way, I will tell you that usually I'm one of those people who puts one word and a picture of a cat on a slide, and since for some reason I didn't get our speaker notes up correctly, I'm very happy that these slides actually have lots of words on them. So we might actually be able to tell you the story we plan to tell you. This is your spoiler alert, so that you know which parts you can tune out and or nap and or check Twitter and or tweet about us, if you like. If you want to tweet about us, the information is at the bottom of every slide. But we're going to talk about, first of all, just a little bit of mental scaffolding. I'm curious if we can get a show of hands of how many people are using Helm 2 in some way. So I would say
Fantastic.
The vast majority of the room, like 85% of the room. How many of you have downloaded and played with the Helm 3 Alpha? I would say maybe 10 people in a giant room. So
11.
11. Okay. And one of our core maintainers, Matt Fisher, put his hand up twice, which is probably valid. Okay.
You're using
So we're going to talk about what's in V3, overview, breaking changes, everyone's favorite, and some of the new shiny excitement. And then we'll kind of say, what are you going to go do now? So we'll see if we can fit all that in 35 minutes plus a demo. All right. So I don't know why I am jumping so far. I'm going to guess it's because I don't know your clicker.
Just push the button once.
I know, right? Push the button, Frank. One time, not multiple. So Helm. Well, if we're going to talk about Helm, which the vast majority of the room already knows perfectly well is a delightful package manager for Kubernetes, I would say we should start with, hey, containers are great. They do solve problems for us, right? But all of us have used Helm and have used containers and know that they super do not solve every problem that we have because they introduce a whole bunch of exciting complexity.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to containers, they don't solve all the problems. They sometimes maybe create more problems, and then we create more solutions. But they do give us an encapsulated runtime environment and gives us a little bit more overhead to not only manage, but to solve this complex world of microservices.
And okay, so we all agree we're here at KubeCon. We definitely want to orchestrate our containers. I actually object to that a little bit. I'm like, orchestration sounds like so much work. Like, can't we just have a little bit of light jazz? I don't know. It's a lot of work. But we need container orchestration. We have Kubernetes. For those of you who weren't eating cake yesterday or the day before, whenever that was, it's all a blur. We are coming up on the 5-year anniversary, which is a little bit dramatic.
It's kind of crazy to see just how far Kubernetes has grown in 5 years, and with that also Helm, because Helm came shortly after Kubernetes.
And so that's the fun part, is when we're like, great, we have containers, we can orchestrate them. Kubernetes has nothing to say whatsoever about managing our applications and all of their versioning. And we could have an exciting microservices murder mystery of all of the YAML is everywhere. Do we have to have a content warning for YAML? Like
tabs or spaces? I mean,
if
where am
YAML
I?
upsets you, I'm so sorry, but there's a lot of YAML in Kubernetes. But if we want to manage all those applications, enter Helm. So should we just go through some of the ways, just kind of breaking it down, some of the ways that Helm makes things easier for you, and most of you are using Helm too, so you already know.
It helps you manage your complexity. Even the most robust and complex charts, or most complex deployments, you can use charts to streamline that. You can obviously version control your releases. Helm simplified a lot. Yeah. But there were still, I mean, aside from offering easy updates, I assume you're going through all the bullet points. Yeah. Aside from offering all the easy updates, it still offered a great deal more complexity and security to consider. And so that was a big thing that the Helm team really wanted to take into consideration when it came from taking a look at what we did right in Helm 2 and then thinking about Helm 3, was really focusing on security and streamlining something that was essentially Helm Classic, enter Google, Helm 2, and then now where are we going in Helm 3?
Absolutely. And so, like, again, sure, sharing is easy, sharing is great. We all want to do that. Is this the part where I say I don't actually believe in this word? I have news for us all. Share can't turn back time, neither can you. But you can roll forward and redeploy a version that will actually solve the problem that you may have introduced with a release. I feel like we spent half this morning doing that.
And even a rollback really is another release, and it still gets a new incremental forward number on a release marker.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about V3. Probably starting with the high-level overview before we start jumping into specific features and specific caveats. I would say this has been a long time coming, more than 4 years, and this is coming from you. This is coming out of the community of people who, created and worked with Helm 2.
Yeah, I mean, how many people have heard the Helm 3 rumors for, I don't know, what feels like the past 9 months now? I mean, the removal of tiller's big, so I'm sure that's probably the prominent question on everyone's mind in here. But also, what does that mean? How does it work the same? What about all these other maybe rumors and spoilers? So that's what we're going to answer really pretty much right now. This section from here on out is really what you're in the room for.
So software release spoilers, I feel like is kind of funny because you know how marketing has a blog post that's embargoed and you're like, if anyone went and just looked at the commit history of that project, none of this would be a surprise. But probably the top level message here is it's much simpler and safer, which getting both of those things at the same time means that there's a lot of work under the hood to make it feel seamless, but work better. And that does mean, by the way, that everyone who kind of pen tests Helm and goes, Tiller, that's a juicy target, like excellent, because security is a priority and that's not there anymore. I would also say that this is really focused on production realities. And we'll talk a little bit more later about, spoiler alert, library charts, for example, let you do a lot of exciting things that your, say, enterprise governance would really like you to do.
So Bridget commented on how Helm 3 really came from listening to all of you, everyone who uses it. And a lot of it was really listening to how you're using and implementing Helm in production and realizing security needs that weren't being met. So that's where it is more secure, and it's focusing on how to really adopt and consider that security in production real-world scenarios.
And it's not that it wasn't possible to secure before. It absolutely was. It was just a lot more work. And now we're going with security as a primary feature by default. And maybe one of the things that might be a surprise if people haven't been looking at the commit history back for many years is Helm literally almost predates Kubernetes. Like it definitely predated a whole bunch of the 1.6, 1.7, 1.8 features that we consider to be basic and necessary at this point.
Yeah, it really it came out of a hackathon. For people who don't know the history behind it, it was at a company offsite called Deus, and it came out of a hackathon, I believe, in October of 2014, which Kubernetes was in June of 2014. So it's really just a few
maybe?
months.
Yeah,
2015.
Okay. It was very close. We have our experts in the front row guiding us, which is good.
Years and dates are hard.
You're better than speaker notes.
But it's still, it's almost as old as Kubernetes. It kind of came after the fact. That was Helm Classic. By the time Helm 2 came around, you had two different code bases that were really being merged because you had Google also bringing their, I forget what their name of it was.
Deployment Manager?
Deployment Manager, yeah, a lot of creativity, but bringing that in, and then now you have Helm 2. And so that really sets us up for where we're going with.
Yeah.
today.
And I think that one of the major refactors needed was the fact that this predated role-based access control, which is essential and fundamental to Helm at this point, but yeah, or rather to Kubernetes at this point, but Helm actually came in and implemented this sort of thing in its own way, as well as CRDs. So I think probably some of the changes that are necessary and helpful is, like, instead of having a custom way to do, the charts and deployments, like replacing those custom APIs with just using Kubernetes secrets.
Yeah, having it more native and relying on what Kubernetes already does and doesn't reinvent a second option or a second way of doing things. So really pulling in what Kubernetes does and treating Helm truly as what it was designed to be, which is a package manager. It is designed to be an on-ramp into Kubernetes, so utilize Kubernetes resource objects with Helm charts for simplification.
Yeah. And just getting the security controls from kubeconfig and using the Kubernetes role-based access controls. This is again the security focus that's a big part of Helm 3.
Absolutely.
Okay, so want to explain now. How many of you were the people cheering when in the keynote we talked a little about the removal of tiller and we got cheers, which is like, okay.
Everyone's like, yes. Do I raise my hand? It's okay.
Like, yeah, you don't have to cheer now, but I'm just saying it was very funny to get spontaneous cheers for something being removed from a project. And I think that honestly, this to me is one of the biggest signs of project maturity, because it's very easy to have sprawl and feature creep and add lots and lots of things. And choosing to take the time to edit yourself to make the user experience better is a lot of work.
Yeah.
And so when we say we're shipping tiller removal as one of the major features, what we're shipping is we're lowering the barrier of entry for contributors. We're shipping more stability, more security, and just ease of use.
Yeah, speaking of ease to use, just to kind of see how fast I could get this up and running using Helm on a brand new Kubernetes cluster, I spun up a cluster yesterday. That took about 5 minutes. And then I downloaded Helm and pretty much ran Helm init, and that was it. I didn't have to create service accounts. I didn't have to do cluster role binding. I didn't have to make sure that tiller was ready and available. It was ridiculously simple. Just by a show of hands, how many people in the room are familiar with draft? Okay, so like another 10 people. So draft actually works in combination with Helm and simplifies Helm. It allows you to easily get up and running and start projects. Draft was also created by the same team that created Helm. When Draft first came out, it operated very similar to Helm. You would have an in-cluster daemon that would essentially sit there and translate what you're passing back and forth. Probably about 9 months ago, I want to say, that daemon was removed from Draft. And Draft now operates the same way. It's a client-only tool. So for those of you in the room that have used Draft, if you haven't, check out Draft Create. It's on Twitter. It's awesome. It will help you with Helm. But for those of you in the room who are familiar with it, the easiest way to understand how Helm now works with the removal of tiller is to consider it the same way on how Draft now works. There is no in-cluster daemon. It's a client-side only tool, but you're interacting with your Kubernetes cluster the same exact way.
Yeah, absolutely. And so again, simpler and more secure. We have a few other changes that we want to highlight just because they may be at first a little confusing. These are actually, we have aliases so that if you type it the old way, it's fine. It's just going to do the new thing. The CLI, slight changes.
Yeah, and you can do, so I have a GitHub repo we're going to show at the end, and I created a script that I don't recommend just running the script on your system. I never recommend that. Read the script first, please.
Oh, come on, people trust you, right?
I don't advocate that at all, but it'll show you how to set it up with an alias. And the demo I'm going to show you today, the Helm alias I'm using is H3, but essentially when you're running the Helm commands, you can do Helm 3 or H3 if you use my suggestion, and do, -H or help. You can actually see all the new commands that exist. Certain commands were removed. Serve is one of them, mainly because we felt that people weren't actually using it really, but you can also see how certain commands have now changed. They're now more native to package management repository understandings. Rather than doing a Helm fetch, I do a Helm pull. rather than having to do helm delete -- purge, so I could make sure I could reinstall using the same name, I just do helm uninstall and the name of the release. If I want to keep the history, obviously I can use a keep history flag. So it gives me more control and still gives me the same control I'm used to, but while making it more native and easy really to understand.
And when we say more native, we specifically mean all of the finger macros you have from working with Kubernetes and with other tools in this space. Just to kind of, again, Helm predated a lot of that, but now comes in to be more consistent.
Yep.
All right, so we'll talk about some breaking changes. We have a link here. It's not a link about breaking changes specifically, but it's a link for contributors about the things that were expected between 2 and 3, so that you can get an idea of exactly, we're not going to go into all of them, though, again, there is more detail in there in terms of what kind of expectations existed and are now being shattered and changed. But we'll highlight a couple of the things that you will notice right away, since you're almost all used to Helm 2.
So for one of the coolest things that I saw was that Helm deployments now in Helm 3 are specific to a namespace. So that means if I do Helm install stable WordPress, previously, by default, it's going to go into whatever namespace I was in, but I wouldn't be able to name that the same name. So if I name that, obviously, I don't know, Walking Panda, and then I had my install, I wouldn't be able to have another deployment that's Walking Panda in any namespace. Now, Helm releases are per namespace. So I can deploy it with the same exact name, just to different namespaces. Also, with the name architecture specifically, you have to specify a name. So you have to give it a name if you want it to give you...
Yeah, we'll give you a slide that has that detail, but before we jump to that, because you're right, that is important, we should also tell them, if you're going from Helm 2 to Helm 3, in your same cluster, you can't upgrade a Helm 2 release directly to be a Helm 3 release. You can certainly redeploy, but if I'm understanding this correctly, the migration story is in progress, but more on that as the alpha is consumed and tested by people.
And one comment for that is, while you can't upgrade a Helm 2 release, I also work very closely on a DevOps team, and you're obviously coordinator for DevOps Days. If you're doing DevOps best practices and you're keeping your charts in source control, version controlled, you're bumping them accordingly, you have values files associated with your projects and part of your pipelines, that shouldn't really be an issue from a theoretical perspective. You should be able to just do H3 or Helm 3, whatever your version is for your alias, and redeploy that same chart with the same values file. That's going to operate the same way. But if you have an existing chart and you're trying to upgrade that release, that's where she's clarifying you can't directly upgrade right now. A migration story is in the works.
And then something else to keep in mind is there are changes to chart dependency management.
So the old style, you used to have a requirements file, and you would put your dependencies and fill that out. Specifically, if you consider like the WordPress chart, and I would have a requirements file that said that MariaDB was a dependency, that now goes actually in the chart YAML.
Which is a good thing, because this is collapsing some complexity. Again, like Helm 2, the chart dependency management stuff came in after Helm 2's file format and whatnot was already in place. And so that's why this was often a separate file. It doesn't need to be anymore, and so the team put a lot of work into collapsing that complexity so that you didn't have to do that anymore.
And then also, if you do use Helm dependency commands, you are going to have to do some tweaking to adapt it to the new Helm 3 versioning. But again, it was designed to help streamline things and simplify the process, remove some of that complexity layer.
And then what you were just talking about, which is, I think it's the generate name stuff, it still exists. You can still use it if you want your chart to be called Il Marmot, I think is one I just got. Yes, you can still name it that.
You can, but you now have to specify a name, or you have to specify a flag that you want Helm to generate a name for you. It's not just going to do it automatically, which I think is good, because theoretically, again, if you're considering the reason why Helm 3 kind of came about was also taking the feedback and making it better, more secure for production-based deployments. In production, you're probably going to have it name a release. You don't want a production serving microservice that's Walking Panda, and it's like, oh, I got to go update Walking Panda right now.
I mean, that's kind of fun, you know, put that in your task tracker. But yeah, this basically, we're thinking about scale.
Yes.
Oh, I jumped too far. But let's talk about excitement, adventure, and we're going to go right to some of the new things.
So one of the new things is the Helm chart repository API. And Helm 3 overall, we're also working on standardizing compatibility with OCI standard.
And there's a lot of, if this is a space that's interesting to you, there's a lot of work in this space that you should jump in. I mean, this is where you get your feedback, you get, look at what's in GitHub, and we're aiming for, we'll see if we get there soon, but we're aiming for, lots of choices, pluggable auth, novel artifact types,
ability to host on Azure Container Registry.
Or any of your,
private registries.
Registries of choice. So there's a lot of things in this space that are interesting that you might be excited about contributing to.
So one thing, she's commented on contributing. This is very much an alpha release, right? This is alpha 3.0. There are things that aren't perfect. One of the things I'm going to show you in here today is if I wanted to deploy a chart to a namespace, right now the -- namespace flag doesn't work. You can use other tools to switch namespace and still deploy, and that's being fixed, but it is an alpha version. We want you to go use it and contribute and be a part of it. These are great opportunities. If any of these topics pique your interest, these are great areas where you could come participate and contribute.
And we didn't plan it, but it was perfect for you to have a bunch of talking before we put this very word-heavy slide up, because one of the things that people were wondering about is, tell me about this Lua thing, and if I'm not a Lua expert, does that mean I can't really use Helm anymore? I like my templates just fine. And actually the templates still work just fine. Using Lua is completely optional if it solves problems that you have. And an example of the kind of problems it solves, you can kind of,
Well, examples of kind of, in Helm 2, you would have late binding errors. You can simplify and streamline your chart design. In fact, when you use Lua, which is designed as a programming language, obviously, you can simplify the amount of lines in your deployment itself. If you have a chart and a template that's 100 lines, you might be able to simplify that down into 25 or 30. So there are benefits for that, but you don't have to use it. And my understanding is also Lua is still staggered in the next release.
Yeah. I mean, it's not in the alpha, but it's coming soon, TM. And then the other thing to consider too is that one of the benefits that you get is being able to, because it's a real programming language, you can actually validate, your charts before you ship them and wait. So that's kind of helpful. You can put those conditionals in.
Yeah.
So, okay. Library chart support. This is kind of exciting.
Yeah, so you can share by other charts. It's not going to create any release artifacts of its own, but you can use a chart library to declare and define specific elements. And as a result, again, it simplifies your overhead from a reusable code standpoint.
And if you're thinking to yourself, well, reusability sounds great, but I work at a giant enterprise and we have very important policy problems to solve, one of the things that this could help you with is you could, for example, say, here's a chart that has some, pod control stuff built into it, and we're going to make everyone import this particular library chart so that we enforce this policy on all of our charts without having to hope people follow the guidelines.
So you can enforce pod security as a result is one example. And then demo time. So now I'm going to go ahead and I guess switch over to my system. And so let me show you VS Code here. So I have a Helm SH script, which pretty much just has a bunch of Helm 3 commands in it. I'm going to show you the script that I use to set up Helm. All of this is on GitHub. We'll give you a link to it. But essentially, I set a Helm version on line 5. You can see right here. This one is using a Mac. You could change the version to whatever the version is. It's on the release page of the Helm download. I'm just using wget to get it. I extract the file. I am making a directory in my temporary directory. Using the temporary directory is also recommended on the Helm release notes page.
Especially if you're still trying to use Helm 2.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times you're testing out Helm 3, but you're still using Helm 2 for your production uses. And if you're not careful, you will override your Helm 2 install with your Helm 3 install.
So that's one thing I did realize. I will have to update this, this chart. Actually, you also will want to export your Helm home configuration to go also to a temporary directory, so you don't override your Helm home files. But you you move the binary over into a temporary folder. I set a temporary alias. You can also export that. So that's how I moved Helm 3 into my Helm 3 alias that we're going to go ahead and see. I'm going to switch over to my terminal here real quick. I'm going to clear this top screen. Now, the first thing is I have Helm 2 and Helm 3 both installed on the system. I have multiple clusters. Only one cluster is using Helm 3. You can see the clusters and the namespace over in this top right corner. If I scroll over here, we're going to go ahead and type Helm version. That's using Helm 2, and you'll see it cannot find tiller. But if I do H3 version, which is my Helm 3 instance, I don't get any error, and I just get that I'm using the version alpha. So I can still have both versions on here. Now, I'm currently in the default namespace on a cluster that has Helm 3 set up, or not Helm 3 set up because I didn't have to set up tiller, but it's just a completely clean cluster.
Oh, and so we should warn you, this is not a recommended production configuration, #disclaimer.
Well, and it's also alpha, so I mean, this is very much kind of showing you how to get started, how to kind of start playing with it. If I do a Helm Alias, you're going to see I do have a few charts. So I have an Nginx ingress chart and a Jenkins chart that I've already deployed. I'm going to show you the commands that I used to deploy it. I didn't change the charts whatsoever. I just changed the alias from Helm to H3, and the chart works the same way. But I also ran that command against the default namespace. If I do a kubeNS and I change to my kube system namespace, I also deployed the cert manager chart. So we'll let it switch over. You can see kube system is now activated. You can see kube system over here on the right. By the way, kubeNS, and if I were to use kube context to change my context, there is a link in the document that'll help you get some of these tools. I do recommend them from a Kubernetes management perspective. But now if I do H3LS, you'll see that I have an additional chart. So rather, previously when you would do Helm LS, you'd see all your charts and all the random namespaces. Now you can really see how the deployments are per namespace. I can switch back over to kubeNS default, and I'm back over in my default namespace. The commands are a little bit slow. Now, if I zoom out, we're going to go over here. I'm going to show you my Helm commands. To install the ingress, I literally just ran Helm 3 upgrade, install Nginx ingress. I named it. I could choose to generate the name, and then I chose the stable upstream chart. If I were to copy that and redeploy, it just upgrades and installs it the same way that it normally would. I'm not going to get any errors. So really, a lot of the work, I think a lot of people were wondering how Helm is going to work with the removal of tiller. It's going to operate the same way. Again, the example that I showed you for those who have used Draft is it operates the same way because it's still a client-side tool. Tiller was always what lived in the cluster itself. So you can see it just deployed, but I already had it deployed, but it's going to give me any kind of information, and it spits everything back. Now, if I want to show you specifically, because one thing you will notice when you play with this, if I go ahead and run an H3 upgrade this command, and I change the name of the namespace. So I'm running H3 upgrade Jenkins -- install. I have an install living in a KubeCon namespace. But because I'm doing this on stage, I'm leaving the name of the deployment the same, but I'm specifically deploying it to a KubeCon live namespace. You're going to notice when I run it, it's going to seem pretty uneventful because it's just going to tell me that it doesn't exist and it installed. There's not going to be any output that's spit back. Previously in Helm 2, you're going to get this long list of all the objects and resources and everything that was created, as I apparently now that did deploy. So literally 5 minutes ago when I was doing that, it does not give you this long list. If you don't get the long list, that's by design, because they actually pulled all the code out of it to give you a spitback as far as all the objects. And they're going to redesign that. If you try to parse this code and parse this example into, I just want the namespace, I just want the names, I just want the version, it's really hard to parse that code. And so that is something that is also on the roadmap for changing that and streamlining the way that you can actually parse the spitback or the output from your running commands. And just to show you how the deployment actually works, if I do k get pods -n, I put that in KubeCon live. I don't see anything. That's fine. We'll go ahead and do kget pods where I deployed out my Jenkins deployment. You can see I deployed that 38 minutes ago. I literally did it as a backup, just in case, 2 minutes on stage. I wanted to make sure that everything was working. It's always hard when you're live with conference Wi-Fi. But I do have a Jenkins deployment up and running. So if I do kubectl port forward, I'm going to port forward over to 8080, which is my working deployment right now. I'll switch over to Google Chrome, and I'll refresh. I'm already signed in. And I did that. That was the deployment that I did moments ago. We can zoom in and see localhost. I signed in and was able to export. We'll clear out this top screen here, I ran the print command, the same command that I would normally run from a Jenkins chart to get my password. It's okay if this shows on screen because I'm deleting this afterwards, but that's the password that I used to go ahead and sign in. So this deployment was done from Helm 3. I didn't have to make many changes aside from modifying my values file as I would any other deployment, and Helm 3 is going to operate the same way. So a lot of the changes that we reviewed are really changes that are under the hood. From an actual use perspective, it's very similar. If I do a Helm or h3-h, you'll see how some of those commands that I told you are different. So now I can do Helm uninstall. The last thing I'll show you is h3 uninstall Jenkins, which is the name of the release I did. And now if I do that, it's going to uninstall without me having to do a Helm delete -- purge and this big long word. It's just going to work.
And that's one of those things that's kind of funny is like a lot of work goes into making it look like less, but it actually is more because it's easier.
They completely refactored the entire code.
Yeah.
So I know we have about just a little over 3 minutes left.
Should we
switch back over to
switch back over?
Yep.
Just hit play. We'll be good. Whoa. Yeah, I was like, nice. All right. So, what's next?
So, well, one thing, let's go ahead and take a look at the next slide. So I'm sure you're curious with, okay, so this is Helm 1, but what is also coming, Helm 3 release
Alpha
1, sorry, Alpha 1. But what's also coming in the next releases?
And by the way, if they haven't, because very few people have played with the Alpha yet. So
yes.
If you haven't played with the Alpha, Alpha 1 is available now. And you can play with Helm without tiller, as you saw Jessica doing right there.
And we are going to give you a link to the repo. Set up Helm SH, or the shell script that I created, which I will modify. It's something that's super brand new. They're making changes as we speak. But again, this will help you get started, and that Helm chart will help you get started, or the Helm script. But the biggest change that you can see in Helm 1 that you're going to get used to is the fact that tiller's... Alpha 1, sorry. Helm 3, Alpha 1, is the fact that it is now tillerless. Yep. In Alpha 2...
but before we move off of Alpha 1, the library chart stuff that we started talking about, where you can maybe use that to enforce some policy, is available now. The way secrets are stored, the secret storage backend, is available to test. They started the groundwork for the OCI stuff.
For OCI, and there are also chart commands you can take a look at that are exploratory right now. In fact, when you go to the Helm releases page, they give you pretty much a little overview of some of the stuff that we've talked about, but it tells you where we're at with some of the new commands and some of the new things that the Helm team is testing.
But I think we are all excited about Alpha 2.
Yes. Alpha 2, it's on the roadmap to have the addition of Lua, again, having that be optional. Also do some cool things with XDG and actually start OCI integration.
And then Alpha 3, and again, like these don't have dates on them for a reason, because your feedback is going to be a big part of this process in terms of the roadmap. But making the upgrade logic different than it is now. Do you want to talk a little bit about the three-way diffs? Like why, when you're looking at what you have, in the chart, and you're looking at what you have that you are trying to put in, you also kind of want to see what's deployed in production as well. I
want to be able to check and kind of see where I'm at, and then use that to gauge what I'm going to ultimately release.
So maybe three-way diffs, maybe server-side apply, like that's a work in progress. Join us on GitHub for that. The plugin stuff, just adding a lot more with Lua.
Yeah, especially having Lua as a plugin, that's definitely on Alpha 3. And again, a lot of this is all what's on the roadmap right now. This can change. There are certain things that were on the roadmap for Alpha 1 that changed. We need your feedback. So that's going to lead us, I think, into the next slide, which is get involved. In order to really have a product that's going to be able to deliver value and that's going to do what you need it to do in production and in your workloads, we need to have feedback. So there is a deep dive today led by members, the core maintainers of the Helm team.
They are right here. You can chat with them or chat with them at 4:45 p.m. today. Unless the app has changed it, they are in 8.0 D4, which is very close to here.
You can also go to the Helm 3 docs. It's at the v3.helm.sh. Some parts of the docs you'll notice are still talking about Helm 2. This really is alpha. This really is brand new. But if you see something that should be clarified, if you like contributing also to docs, you can also contribute. I think it's on the version 3 branch, but you can also contribute to the docs as well. We essentially want to listen. We want to work with all the members of the community, so we invite you to get involved.
And if you're like, pull requests accepted, that sounds so hostile, I just want to talk to some people. There's a community call literally every week. You can see the link on helm.sh. And we're very interested in like the new use cases and workflows that you come up with, given the changes, because we want this to work for you. And if you would like to spend a lot of time with actual Helm people for like a 2-day event in wonderful Amsterdam in the fall, which is gorgeous, the CFP is open for the rest of the month.
Yep, until May 31st. And I think we'll be there.
I think we'll be there, and we'll definitely have a whole bunch of the community who's here there, and we hope that you're going to be there too.
Yep, so, and also, again, core maintainers from the Helm team, I'm assuming, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the place to be if you want to be doing in-person Helm project stuff. And we do have a blog post that is listed with all of the details for that. If you want to learn more about all of these things, I mean, we have the deislabs.io page, points to a lot of the tooling in this space, including draft, other tools that Jessica talked about.
And then you can also go check out all the scripts. There's a scripts folder. It actually has a setup AKS if you wanted to get started with setting up a cluster, and then set up Helm, which is essentially the SH file, or the shell script file that I went through, that really just shows you how to set it up, put it into a temp directory. I will update that with some of the export commands and kind of streamline it. But it's a great kind of little, okay, let me go ahead and try with these charts. For the record, on the deployment on the cluster that I have, I had 3 Helm charts. I had Nginx Ingress, Cert Manager, and Jenkins all installed, all using normal charts from Helm 2. I just changed it to H3 and deployed, and that's it.
Yep. And of course, since we work at Microsoft, we can tell you that there are some great docs available for our managed Kubernetes solution if you're into that. And if you just want to learn more, that short link there for the Microsoft Learn pages specifically around Kubernetes have some really good like Lightbox videos of Brendan Burns, explaining concepts. So show that all to your team who are trying to onboard on this stuff.
Yep. And then I think that's pretty much a thank you.
I think that's pretty much a thank you, and it's popped out.